Hey there, how you doing? Welcome to Dan Records and Out the Wolf Review. Hope things are good where you are. Where I am, it is June 2nd on a Tuesday, and the manure is still going down. Hopefully things are going to be settled by the weekend. Who knows? Maybe change will come from this. Maybe. I'm beginning to think the only time we're going to get change is if first things first we change the guy in the White House. But that's playing the long game at this point. In any case, welcome to the show. You may notice we have changed format. We are no longer doing the VR 360 degree bit. We are now in 3D. If you want it to be. It doesn't have to be that way if you don't particularly like 3D. If you're watching this on a Roku box or through your cable service, you're not going to be getting 3D anyway. If you're watching it on your desktop computer or your laptop computer or your mobile device, you can turn off the 3D if you don't like it by hitting... actually should be round about there, the little gear there, and changing the settings. Easy enough. But I'm glad you're here. We've got a review to do, which is actually going to air this weekend on Hour of the Wolf, and then this video will follow up on that as a kind of a little behind-the-scenes thing, so you can see how the sausage gets made. So... let's give it a shot, shall we? Okay, so if you're watching for the first time, let me remind you that I am recording a review for Hour of the Wolf, a radio show that... I'm not going to be doing anything. My voice keeps cracking like that. I'm recording for Hour of the Wolf, a radio show that runs on WBAI 99.5 FM in New York. And it's now running every other Saturday at 5 a.m. So you can check that out. It's a good show. Jim Freund is a swell host, and it's worth checking out. But when you hear the review on Hour of the Wolf, or if you have heard the review that I'm about to do, you're going to realize that that is heavily edited. I'm getting better at reading from a script, but I still mess up a lot. And you're going to hear all of that. But you will be hearing all of that. The other thing is that I'll be taking a few minutes once I start this review here, not a few minutes, a few seconds to record some room tone so that I can use that just empty space to filter out the actual room tone through the editing software that I do, so it quiets things down a little bit. Okay, and... let's give it a shot. Let me just check because the recorder should be running, which it is. That is very nice. Okay. So we're going to be doing it. It's going to be a longer review this time because I felt motivated this time. You'll find out why. Let's do it. Let's take a few seconds to record room tone. And here we go. Hour of the Wolf movie review, air date June 6th, 2020. Space Force. Take one. I'm Dan Persons, and this is my Hour of the Wolf review. There are two things I'm obsessing about with Space Force, the new science fiction alleged comedy series that just debuted on Netflix. One is China, the other is Lisa Kudrow's hair? Let's start with the latter. Kudrow plays Maggie Naird, wife of the freshly minted 4-star General Mark Naird, played by Steve Carell, who's just been handed the task of establishing the brand new Space Force in an abandoned military facility in Colorado. The first time we see Maggie, she is passive-aggressively signaling that she's not particularly happy with the news that instead of moving to a cushy home in a D.C. suburb, she and the couple's teen daughter, played by Diana Silvers, will be decamping to an isolated corner of the country. The next time we see Maggie, it is 1 year later. The Naird family has indeed moved to Colorado, and Maggie is in the midst of serving a 40-year sentence for an unspecified crime. That never does get specified, which is a whole other plotting issue. But what stands out in the sequence where General Naird visits his wife is that we see that approximately 1 year of black roots have grown out on Maggie's hitherto blonde head. It's actually a funny, nonverbal way of delineating the character, who she was, who she is now, and what effect her situation is having on her. In a subsequent episode, we see her hair done up in cornrows, which Maggie says was done by a member of her gang before she autocorrects with a sidelong glance to a nearby guard to say it was a member of her book group. Again, a funny way of showing the journey the character is going through. If I'm remembering correctly, this is also the episode where there's a joke about prison rape, but there's a bit of finesse to it, so I'm letting it slide. Now, jump ahead a few episodes, and the next time we see Maggie, the cornrows are gone, as are the prominent roots, with only the barest hint of blackness at the top of her head. Excuse me a second. With only the barest hint of blackness at the top of her head. TV series traditionally play fast and loose with continuity. It's never been explained how Squire of Gothos with only the barest hint of blackness at the top of her head. TV series traditionally play fast and loose with continuity. It's never been explained how Squire of Gothos Trelane became Klingon Commander Koloth, but it's easy enough to slap a wig on an actor's head. This feels more like the producers saying, let's just forget how this character was developing, okay? And it's later revealed that her quote-unquote book group is literally a book group, which might have been a good joke if done right, but comes off as cautious revisionism here. The China aspect also falls into the category. But comes off as cautious revisionism here. The China aspect also falls into the category of might have been funny if done right. The series' main adversary is China. There's also a Russian spy embedded in the force by none other than the unnamed but very obvious president. But like so much in this series, he's unevenly delineated and poorly deployed. China, meanwhile, is more specifically supposed to be the burr under the blanket for General Naird, the Jimmy Pesto to his Bob Belcher, for those of us who know Bob's Burgers, or the Gary's Old Town Tavern to his Cheers, for those of us who haven't watched television in the past 30 years. But here as well, series creators Carell and Greg Daniels failed to make any kind of comedy capital out of the conflict. Failed to make any kind of comedy capital out of the conflict. Part of it is that they don't manage to put a face to the Space Force's adversary. Going back to Trek, the fun of The Trouble with Tribbles was Kirk's interaction with Koloth, not his swearing at the entire Klingon Empire. The other is that in keeping China anonymous and monolithic, means their presence can only be expressed through special effects, their spacecraft and their moon base. Yes, they have a moon base in this reality, which means because of presumably budget constraints, they only become an issue in the first 2 and last 2 episodes of the season, instead of providing an ongoing counterpart for Naird to square off against. I haven't read any reviews with Carell or Daniels about Space Force, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were going around saying that this isn't really a science fiction series, but an office comedy with science fiction flavoring. That might be a clever thing to say under other circumstances, but here it would just be a signal that they realized that science fiction demands a consistent worldview, and Space Force is anything but consistent. And Space Force is anything but consistent. They tried to pull the Michael Scott bit with General Naird, where he's a jerk for 99% of an episode, but shows a shred of decency at the very end. But his character is all over the place, a militaristic blowhard, a Pentagon company man, a loving father, etc., etc., without any finesse from one beat to another. John Malkovich plays a science advisor who goes from viciously insulting to being General Naird's bestest buddy, with no gradation between the two. The political satire is weak. There are glancing digs at government bloat that go nowhere. The Space Force campus is impossibly luxe for such an isolated and secret operation. One sequence is even set in the swooping atrium that also serves as home base for the second season of Prime Video's much better series Homecoming, presumably so Carell and Malkovich can scream at each other in a way that couldn't be accommodated by Space Force's otherwise actual constricting sets. And there's an incredibly awful episode where the Space Force goes on military games to test out competing exoskeletons that's so out of step with the rest of the series that it feels like the producers took footage from another show and deep-faked the faces of Space Force's stars onto the actors. Space Force's stars onto the actors. The irony is that the actual real-life Space Force, with its camouflaged spacesuits and graphics stolen from Star Trek, has become a more effective farce than the fictional Space Force could ever be. Carell and Daniels had a golden opportunity to send up the ludicrousness of what happens Carell and Daniels had a golden opportunity to send up the ludicrousness of what happens when the commander-in-chief can dream no bigger than the sometimes this happens. We'll get it. Carell and Daniels had a golden opportunity to send up the Namaste. Take a beat. Carell and Daniels had a golden opportunity to send up the ludicrousness of what happens when the helicopters flying around. It's not really distracting me. I just wanted to let you know. Carell and Daniels had a golden opportunity to send up the ludicrousness of what happens when the commander-in-chief can dream no bigger than a 1950s comic book. But through a failure to fully embrace the satirical potential, they just came up with something muddled and half-hearted. I ran long with this one, so I'm just going to remind you to check out Historama 3D on YouTube. But I do want to emphasize that if you can, please help out those in great need. If you're out protesting, stay safe and be careful. And given our present situation, if you've been donating, maybe you should expand who you're giving to. Like perhaps throw in the NAACP Legal Defense Fund at naacpldf.org into the mix. Just for fun. Look, things obviously have not gotten any better, so do what you feel you need to do, wherever you feel it will do the most good. Thank you. For Hour of the Wolf, I'm Dan Persons. And that'll take care of it for now. Wow, yeah, so I hope you're all safe. I hope you're all well, whatever you are doing. I do believe we're going to be coming through this, and hopefully things will be getting better for people who have lived too long under this situation. And hopefully we're going to get the racist moron out of the White House, too. In any case, take care, be well, and I may see you next week if I do another one of these as a standalone, or maybe I shall see you the week after next. Be well.